Okay, hello everybody and welcome to another video in my custom chess position, What's Your Decision? In this video, I'm going to go over the f4, f5 lines again, but instead of g takes f5, which in the video I just recorded previous to this, actually white has a win there in the knight d3 lines. So, but in this video we're showing d5 instead of g takes f5. And in here there's a new line as well, though this is not winning for white, but there is a new line. I have a playlist on my channel with this custom position, so please watch that, as I won't be recapping old lines, but there's been another update. So if we look over here, e3, rook e8 recently was discovered as the only move to hold for black, and after this we had two viable options. One was g4. So note I had over here was after g4 several moves work, including knight c6, c6, and g takes f5, but if white wants to keep things simple, white should play bishop f2, in which only knight c6 works, and transposes to g4 knight c6 lines. So here bishop f2 also works. And then I had e takes d4, which was inaccurate and slightly better for black. But in this video I'm going to be covering knight d3, which, as you're seeing, and in some of these f4 variations where I hadn't thought of this line or this move before, knight d3 is actually a very viable move, and in this video I'm going to be discussing knight d3. Okay, so knight d3 is a move that white can play over here, and the idea of knight d3 is similar to the opening with g takes f5. It's where white eventually wants to sacrifice the knight on b4, and then after a pawn takes or a king takes, take on d4, take on c3, maybe even knight f2, knight d3 check. If the king's on b4, then get out with the queen. And in lines like this, black isn't able to have a pawn cover because white completely destroys it, and black's king is out in the open, which generally can be winning for white if they can pull it off, which is why knight d3 is such a strong move. And so if we look at it from black's perspective, black is kind of cramped, but they would like to get their pieces out with like c6 and bring their pieces out over here. That's kind of a secondary plan though, because right now they're just trying to not lose with all white's pressure, which can make this opening a little bit difficult to play for black. But if you know the theory, then it should be a bit easier to play. So there's a few moves that don't work. D takes e3 just weakens the cover on c3, and if I go forward a few more moves, e4, f takes g4, bishop takes g4, knight e6, knight hf2, c6, knight e4, and knight takes c3. So you can see that black kind of doesn't have any way to stop white from taking on c3, and because black's development takes longer, black isn't anywhere close to taking on f6, so white would win this position. And going back over here, just another line, c6 takes on f5, knight c7, knight hf2, knight d5. So now black is protecting c3 and threatening to take on f6, knight g4 over here, which protects f6, bishop d6, now trying to go back to f8 and to potentially take over here and then take on f6. So black has their own threats, but after bishop f3, bishop f8, knight de5, bishop takes h6, knight takes h6, knight takes e3. So if black were to take on f6, then king h5, and black is kind of struggling to play moves here. The knight can't really move without being taken, whereas the rook gonna go. So after queen, let's say queen g7, black wants to play f6 now, but white can play f6 themselves, and black can take, and then knight takes on g8, queen e6, knight can go back to h6, f6, knight eg4, knight f7, f5. As you can see, it's still very complicated, but white should win because white has, okay, they have 4 minor pieces here that are out plus a rook, and black has, okay, 2 minor pieces, but this bishop isn't doing much over here, so they essentially have a queen, a rook, a minor piece out. So white is up 3 minor pieces and a couple of pawns for that piece, and they can eventually free their own queen, as this pawn is only defended by one other pawn. So white should be winning over here. So promote this line because it's a bit more challenging for white to win. But if not for that, then knight takes e3, which after knight h5 the bishop was left hanging. Rook e1, knight d5, knight eg4, knight c7, and black in this line isn't really getting their queen and bishop free, and white is going to probably play rook e3 and rook takes c3 or some similar sacrifice, so white is winning over here. So that's all to say that taking on e3 doesn't really work because it weakens c3. That's the main reason. Over here we do have another move that loses, which is knight c6, and this move is very difficult to win for white, but it's a brute force win, which shows the power of knight d3 and what that move was for. So e takes d4, and if black were to take back with the pawn, then we take on b4, and it's just winning for white. For example, after king takes b4, there's bishop takes d4, and if the knight were to take, then the queen is actually coming in for checkmate. But anyways, the queen is getting out. So, and if the knight takes, then of course there's bishop takes d4 as well. So that means the knight has to take on d4. Now we play bishop takes, c takes d4, and knight takes b4. So, which again shows the brute force nature of the knight d3 move. So king takes b4, and see the engine doesn't notice that white is winning yet. But after rook takes c3, which white's sacrificing another piece, now this pawn is incredibly weak, only defended by the king, and after knight f2, the knight's going to come to d3, which is going to either force the king away, allowing the queen to take on c3, or after the bishop takes, then white will take back with the pawn and have the queen that will be freed. So c6 is the only move over here, and the reason why that is because the king is going to escape, try to escape at least. Knight d3 check, bishop takes d3, c takes d3, king c5, queen takes c3 check, king d6, bishop g4. So we see in this position, white is up a bunch of material, black is up a bunch of material over here, but white's pieces are free. And in some lines, even if white is not up much material or any material at all, they can still be okay if white's pieces are freed, but they have to have a strong pawn structure around this area over here, the queen side, I guess, for white at least. And the king also has to be more safe, and in this line, both of these are not true. The king is not safe. It's not actually going to be able to escape very well, and also there's no pawn structure that black has that's solid, so white is winning. Bishop g4, that's going to threaten to maybe take and take. So knight c7 check, and you see it's kind of difficult for white to find the win here. They kind of have to know the theory, because see, there's only one winning move here, which is queen b4 check. After c5, again, only one winning move, which is queen a4. And white is essentially trying to play d4 and to kind of keep the light squares weak. For example, if white took on a3 after knight b5, which gains a tempo, and then knight d4, black is kind of solidified over here, though. Engine says rook c4, and yeah, white's just going to take this knight. So even other moves, I guess, could work. But okay, queen a4 is the best move, knight b5, and then d4. And right over here, I mean, black is losing, but if black were to take on d4, there are a couple of wins. So rook d1 is probably the most simple win. well, actually, it's the most, engine evaluated win. Like the engine thinks this is the best, and is actually made in 10 over here because the king is not going to find its safety. However, another win is also queen takes d4, or is it? Sorry, not over here. Where was that win then? Knight takes. F takes g6. And after here, if black were to take back, then there's actually mate in 1. Queen d7 is mate because of the bishop helps. And so the move is b5, and then here is where queen takes d4 check. Sorry. This move now is winning for white because white has this g7. And black doesn't have time to take back. I guess if they were to take back over here, then we just take on e8, and then we're threatening to play f7. So it's winning for white. And yeah, this position should win for white because once the rook moves, white is just going to take on this h7, and they're going to promote their pawns, and black won't be quick enough. And that's to say, if we go back over here, the knight cannot take on d4. So white plays, and black plays rook c6, and then the win is d takes c5, b takes c5, b4, king c7. There's probably a couple ways to do it now. Bishop takes c5, rook takes f6. So here, okay, black doesn't have any king cover. White's c5 pawn is very strong, and the king is not escaped. So black tries to free their own queen, but it's to no use. And if we look at the move over here, that's why it's so difficult for white to win, even though this whole variation with knight c6 is winning, because see, again, there's an only move which is very difficult to see, rook d1. Rook takes f5 check, we just take, we go bishop f3, the rook has to block, there's no, I guess the king cannot take on c5 because that's making the king even more exposed. And after taking queen d8, and white is completely winning over here. Even though black is still up material, and now black's queen and bishop are free. Well, first of all, the bishop is pinned to the queen, and if the queen moves, white can take the bishop. White's close to promoting. The king is in the open, so white is just winning over here. But it's very difficult for white to see this win. So I guess practically not playable. Knight c6 is not playable, but if black wants to give it a try, perhaps they can, because white has to find a lot of moves. But if they know the theory, they probably would win, but black could kind of deviate, and it might be difficult for white to get to a win over here. But there is luckily one move for black over here that is not losing. Otherwise, this variation would also be winning for white. But in this position after knight d3, black can recognize the strength of all these sacrifices and chop up that knight. We can chop up the knight on d3 with the move bishop takes d3. And after c takes d3, we notice that white's queen and bishop are free. But black didn't just free the pieces for nothing. Well, I guess black freed them to avoid all those captures and white winning by brute force. But black still is able to play this position. But again, they have to find b5 here. So if we look at a couple other moves, first there's g takes f5, where black just takes that pawn, and we find after e takes d4 and rook e6. So first of all, after I guess we'll show rook e6 first. So black is trying to get their queen out, but after f takes g4, h takes g4, rook e6, knight g3, f6, black is trying to destroy the cover around white's king, d4, takes, knight f7, rook c takes c3, knight takes g5, king takes g5. And we see in this position, while it's not well, it's not clear. White, the engine does prefer white, and I would as well, because, well, white is up material here, and they can move their king to safety, to at least relative safety before black can get out. And black's king is not very safe either. White is also better developed than black, and the engine seems to agree. If we go all the way back over here, there's also rook e1, d takes c5, the rook takes g1, which prevents bishop d4, so that's why that's important. d4 is played, knight e6, c6 again is played, which helps to stop the development of black's pieces in the corner here. After takes, rook takes h1, bishop takes f5, rook d8, rook c4, and again, this is another one where white should win because of white's better development, and also their queen is free. So this one I like even better than the rook e6 variation, for white at least. So white should also win over here. Going back, okay, so we've covered g takes f5. Now let's cover knight c6 here. After knight c6, there is g4. So white uses that opportunity to defend that pawn. G takes f5, knight g3, takes, b5, knight e4, and after knight e4, white is just better. White's pieces are out, and also they're ahead in development. And white's going to play rook f1, bishop f3. They're going to reroute their pieces, and even in some point there could be knight, which is why b6 is played over here. But overall, white has a better position over here and should win. So going back, that was g takes f5. Now there's rook cd8, and over here white has to find knight g3. So e4 is another move, but after b5, okay, white gets their king to more safety, as black is going to go and try to pull off the sacrifice. e5 doesn't work just because so many pieces are aimed at the square, so black will break through. Actually, this move is, after queen takes f6, white is better over here, but as you can see, white isn't winning. Black's king is a bit more safe than white, though white has moved it back, and white doesn't have too strong of a structure on this side of the board. But white is up a piece for those couple of pawns because black sacrificed a knight, but should be playable for both sides. So that's why if we go back over here, however, knight g3 wins for white. b5 is played. Black's just trying to get the knight in. Knight e4. That's why we don't put the pawn to e4. Okay, rook d5, rook f1, preparing bishop f3 and to attack this rook. Knight b6, bishop f3. And after a move like rook ed8, there is no like clear win for white, but you can see the engine, it's over +1. And if black is not really able to get off a sacrifice on f6, their bishop is out of the game. Their pieces are a little bit awkward, and it's a little bit hard for black to push forward. So white should be winning here, and if you run the engine for longer, it brings up the evaluation a bit more after recognizing that. So g takes f5. If black just takes that extra pawn, white just plays g4, pushes the rook back, and then rook ce1. Okay, knight d7, black is trying to take on here on f6, and they're probably going to take the rook and then take on f6, but white can actually take on c5, and there are other moves that work according to the engine, but this works as well. Knight takes f6, knight b7, takes, so now black gets their queen out, but their rook is hanging. This knight, so black can't really take the knight right now. And in some lines, white can go back to c5, and if black were to take it, then there's like taking on d4, and then that means that this rook over here is hanging. So it's kind of an ugly position for black to have, and white should win this one. Oh, and I think we have one more move to show. This one's also losing. So if black tries to play b5 right away to go in with the knight as quick as possible instead of rook cd8 first, then rook f1, bishop f3 happens again. Bishop f3, knight d7, bishop takes, so now this bishop is like almost permanently out of the game. E takes d4, knight takes f6, takes on c5, and once the knight goes to d5, we put f6 again. And if black were to take this, oh, now there's bishop d4, so black can't take that move, please. And because of that, because this bishop is like completely out of the game, these pawns can't move, so this bishop is basically lost, and black cannot take on f6. White should be able to win this one. Okay. Okay, so going back over here, that means that b5. Okay, so the third move is b5, and this move, black is not losing. So black has to play b5 over here, which is kind of a similar idea after in different openings where black takes, for example, on d3 and sacrifices on g5, which we've seen with the e4 lines. And after freeing white's pieces, normally b5, or in white's case g4, is the best follow-up move. So this move isn't too hard to find, hopefully. But after b5, e takes d4, and of course if black were to take back, then after taking on d4, white is just going to sacrifice and blow the whole cover of black's king. So black has to find something, which is rook e1. If we go back over here, if white does not take on d4 and they play, for example, rook f1 to try and play bishop f3, then there's like g takes f5, g4, knight b6, and now the engine is favoring e takes d4. And so I guess this is what, when we do these things live, we find that there could be other moves. Over here, if we play rook f1, then okay, engine still likes she takes f5 best, but I wonder about d takes c3, rook takes c3. Yeah, that makes sense. So there's g4 over here, and yeah, maybe knight b6 is not the best move over there, because it was starting to like the engine was trying to like white's position quite a bit. But over here, so when we're analyzing this now with the engine, we kind of just let the engine get to a little bit higher depth and see what it says. But yeah, this could be a promising line for white. Okay, let's go. Now it's saying knight b6 as well. Okay, but f takes g4 seems to be prevailing. Let's put this on the board, knight e6. Now we have knight g3, and then rook cd8. So now black has defended this d4 square. I guess white can come in with knight f5. Let me see what I can do over here. See, when I'm making this, I can promote this one over knight b6 and put that knight f5 over here. Okay, c6 makes sense to develop the pieces. Whoa, knight g7. Rook f8, g3. So this is kind of coming up with some of the theory live, but just realize that white could play something else, so you don't always notice this right away. After knight e4, knight e8. And yeah, I guess this is another line that white could play. As you can see over here, white has a slight advantage, but it's not too clear as to any win over here. I guess black is threatening to take on f6 maybe, but maybe not, because this knight on g7 is blocking the queen. Knight h5. And yeah, king b6 could be played over here. And I guess black could play a5 and kind of push forward for promotion eventually, as white kind of has to be tied up over here. But yeah, that's another interesting line that white could try. So going back over here, but the line that I've analyzed prior to this was e takes d4, which is very complicated actually and very forward and tactical. So while the other line I was just going over with rook f1 was more closed and more strategic, after e takes b4 is very tactical. Rook e1 is played, d takes c5 is played, then comes rook takes g1, again to stop bishop d4. D4 is played over here. I guess after knight f2. Yeah, I guess it's very complicated. Knight f2 could be played to free the knight. I had d4 being played just to protect this c5 square and hope maybe aid the sacrifice over here. And now the engine is now the engine is saying that white is better significantly. So after knight f2, we give it a moment. So I have it on 2 threads, 3 lines, and using torch 2, because stockfish 17 and 16 do not work with custom chess positions that have more pieces in the starting position than in a standard chess game. And yes, over here it does look like white is, the engine thinks white is winning after this knight f2 move, which I hadn't seen before I was recording this video. You could see the complexity of this video as I go through some lines and then sit down to record, but then while recording there's a possibility to find some more lines that you haven't seen before. And in this case, if this is winning for white, then this means that this variation with f5 and then d5 is probably not is not playable for black with best play, if that is the case. So, giving it a moment to think, because so after knight b6, it wants knight b6 because it wants to build a play c5. So after knight b6, we allow taking on b6 and then c5 to be played, which runs into d4. And after c takes d4, bishop e4, which I guess stops rook c6 and then rook taking on f6. But rook c6 is also seems to be a move over here. And white is actually up material and the queen is free, so this should be winning for white. Okay, so that means that after rook takes g1, knight f2, which I'll promote, is actually winning for white. So live here, I can promote this line and say winning for white. Now what I've done is I've promoted this entire variation, so knight d3 is now the main line, taking and knight f2 is the main line after knight b6. And what we normally do is if it notices that, for example, that line's winning for white, it might recommend a different move, but it seems that it seems like knight b6 is the best move, and that's just winning for white. And now the engine's kind of reflecting that after e takes d4, white should. So if I change this, it says, I'll say white should win here, but only in the main line with nf2 after rook takes g1. Now we wonder after knight c6. Yeah, these lines probably are now more playable for, oh, not that, but more playable for black than the other one. Which again means that that this variation, that this opening, and live, I guess, live while streaming this, we've revealed that knight d3 in this variation is also winning for white. So it seems like knight d3 is a killer for this f4, f5 variation. And so basically this means that with the f4, f5 move, the only way to not lose with best play for black is to either play knight e6 and then after f5 take on g5, or it's to play the c6, knight c7, knight b5 variation, which I'm going to be recording a video on that like right now as well, where there's been some updates to that opening as well, where the initial, or not the initial, but the most updated variation that I had mainline for that opening is actually probably winning, at least much better for white, but I found another way for black to play it that is not winning for white. So as it is, that one is not winning, but yep, it seems like after knight d3, the win is to bishop takes d3. I'll say this one actually also loses. Bishop takes d3, c takes d3, b5 takes, knight f2, and yep, this just wins. So if I go all the way back, instead of bishop takes g3, what I should do is I should promote this knight c6 line, because in this line the win is very hard to find, and you have to be very accurate to win this one for white. Let's see. So if I go all the way back, what I'm going to do is I'm going to so let's say this is black's best try, because it's the hardest for white to win. So now I'm going to promote this line to the main variation of this opening, because it's the hardest for white to win. But white is still winning here. So that's kind of a little look about how I do my PGN preparation for these videos. But yeah, okay, so last video we discovered that that taking over here is losing for black. This video we discovered that not taking and playing d5 is also winning, so the only move in this position would be c6 then. That would be the only move to hold. Or after f4 you could play knight e6, and after f5 take on g5. But yeah, that's just the current understanding of the position. Remember how in my first set of videos I had concluded that after f5, g takes f5 is playable, but just playing d5 is not. And now it's changed. It changed after that to both ways to play it were playable. Now it's changed again to they're not. So we could find updates to this opening in the future. But at the current state of things, crazy that basically in this position, because taking is also losing, in this position white is already winning, which is just, or not winning because there's c6. Okay, in this position then white is already winning, which is just wow. Okay, that's it for this stream. And look out for the next one.